Okay, so I had a bit of a technical difficulties there. So either this is appearing as a spliced video and yay, then that's a good thing, or you have like a little mini part of this video left. So uh, what we were talking about is that we have an investment demand schedule that we have just traced out. And anytime we think about a demand curve, as this one is, we are saying there is a relationship between a price variable and a quantity variable holding fixed all other things. So what I want to think about is what are the things that would change this investment relationship? And as we'll see, this means, in other words, shifting that demand curve either to the right or to the left. So, in order to think about what things are shifters, what I want to do is appeal to this rational rule again. So, the rational rule for making an investment decision is to undertake the investment decision if the present value of the stream of returns, so again, this is the present value of the future stream of returns, so we're adding up all those, and this is what it's worth, is greater than or equal to the upfront cost of undertaking the project. So if we appeal to this equation, then we should be in a position to understand what are the things that are the shifters of an investment demand curve. So one thing would be technological advances. If technological advances are, I mean, because that means that capital is more productive, that means that future revenue is going to be higher. So in other words, if we're increasing the future revenue next year and in all future years, then we're going to see a higher present value associated with this uh, machine or project, and so we would be more inclined to undertake investment. So technological advances will increase the demand for investment. And as well, because the demand for investment and the demand for loanable funds uh, are going to be thought of in the same way in what we do in the remainder of this chapter, we'll also say that's going to shift the demand for loanable funds to the right. What else would cause there to be an increase in the demand for investment, or in other words, a shift to the right of the demand curve? Well, let's look to the denominator. So in the denominator, we have this depreciation rate. If there's something that reduces the amount of depreciation that occurs in each successive year, then that means that the depreciation adjusted future revenues are going to be higher for all future years. And therefore, the present value of that future revenue stream is also going to be higher. So, again, a reduction in the depreciation rate should be something that would increase investment and increase, as we'll see, the demand for loanable funds. Expectations. If managers are optimistic about future economic conditions, then their estimate for not only next year's revenue, but all of the revenue that is to occur are going to be higher. And so, again, like item number, in the same manner as item number one, this would serve to raise the numerator of what's on the left hand side of this relationship. And so that would cause the present value, of course, of the stream of returns to be higher, and therefore lead to more investment. So the difference between number one and number three, so let me write this down again. This would increase investment expenditures and increase the demand for loanable funds. So the difference between number one and number three is that this technological advance makes capital more productive. This is managers or decision makers in firms making an estimate. So they don't know that the economy's economic conditions for sure are going to be better. They're just forming an opinion about that. So taxes. Higher taxes are going to result in lower after-tax revenues and fewer projects that are going to satisfy the rational rules. So let's see if I can make this work. So far, so good. So the reason that we bring up taxes right now is that this is going to be an element of fiscal policy, and we want to talk about policy and the macroeconomy. Why? So what we saw is that if there's an increase in corporate taxes, we can think about this as having an effect similar to depreciation. This is going to reduce, if you will, after tax and depreciation adjusted revenues, and therefore lead to a reduction in the present value of the stream of revenues or returns. And so the higher, the more pronounced our corporate tax increases, then the more likely it is. And so this would tend to decrease the quantity of investment. Therefore, there would be fewer projects that would have a present value that's greater than the cost, and we'll also see and decrease the demand for loanable funds. Now, flipping this around the other way, what's the argument for cutting corporate taxes, as we've heard a lot of over the last many years, but especially last 4 years? Well, it would be exactly the opposite. This would be something that would stimulate investment, increase the amount of investment, and when there's more investment, this is something that, other things equal, will increase the capital stock, and other things equal, that would tend to increase, as we said, GDP per worker. And, standards of living. So the standard argument of why should corporate taxes be cut? One of the arguments, the overwhelming argument, is this one. This, of course, is not without its trade-offs. So this is the thing that is so fun about econ. Are there any trade-offs? Well, of course there are. And this is the essence of thinking about debates regarding fiscal policy and if cuts are to happen, who should be getting tax cuts. So we'll have some more to say about this as we do a little bit in this chapter, as well as later on down the road. And then finally, and I should say in this, not only can firms be taxed, but they could also be the recipient of subsidiaries. So in the textbook, the example that was given is subsidies for investment in clean energy, for instance, like wind turbines. And we could talk about various types of tax credits and preferences, certain types of investment tax credits, or other kinds of preferences. These could just be viewed as negative taxes. So in other words, if we subsidize more, then that would offer an incentive for more investment. If we subsidize less, then we would have the opposite. Tax preferences should be something that should encourage investment spending. And then the final, let's see if we can make it work here. The final thing that I want to consider when we're looking at this one, next to last technically, but last substantive shifter of the investment relationship is access to capital markets and holdings of cash reserves. So again, the tricky problem with investment projects is that you have an upfront cost, and that's likely to be quite large, with the stream of returns that happens over many, many years into the future. And so the question is, how do we pay for this machine or project that we want to undertake? Similarly, no doubt, many of your families have asked this question: how do I pay for, in essence, the investment project in you, which is your college education, or maybe in some instances as well, your high school education? So these kinds of questions are big and important, and turn, the success with which firms can undertake investment is going to turn in part on their access to capital markets. If firms cannot borrow in capital markets to undertake investment projects, then they have to self-finance. They have to hold on to all of the cat and save year over year over year, for that, in order to undertake those investment projects, which is going to slow the pace of investment, and other things equal, slow macroeconomic growth. So robust capital markets are an important driver of the level of investment. And the other thing that matters in here that you might study in certain classes is the different degree of access to capital markets that different firms have. So much like at a household level, we talked in with consumption that there are differing access to capital markets that is certainly going to contribute to certain households being more hand-to-mouth consumers as opposed to consumption smoothers. And we have the same kind of observation at the firm level. This sort of stuff could talk at length about, but I won't. I would like to, but I won't. For those of you who are going to go on and be econ majors, you might want to take a course. It's called Econ 428, sort of known colloquially as the venture capital class, but the full title is Capital Market Imperfections in Entrepreneurial Finance. And it is focused on, to a large measure, these questions of capital market access and what happens when there are information problems in capital markets. So, of course, the last thing that would influence the investment relationship, but certainly one that we're not going to focus on so much as we go through the rest of this. Oh, and I guess I should have said here, if it's better, I won't write this all out, but better access to capital markets is going to lead to higher investment, other things equal. And then, of course, items 1 through 5 have focused on the left-hand side of this relationship. Item number 6, quite obviously, if the cost of the project itself goes down, then that would be something that would make it more likely that investment spending would happen. But the items 1 through 5 are going to be the ones that we tend to focus on as we go forward. So next up will be our first introduction of the link between the domestic economy and the international economy. And then we'll use that in part. The reason I want to bring it in next up is that we'll use it in the part 3 notes, where we develop the loanable funds market. So we have half of it now, but we need to think about the other half. So with that, I'll sign off and ask you to check back in for parts 2 and part 3.